Thence the past profound and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in beliefs of eons. I now see it, here to receive it, uphold it, vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning, to liberate all beings, let's generate the supreme bodhicitta. Let us now continue with our class on the Surangama Sutra. The Surangama Sutra indeed is so profound. If we had never had the opportunity to study it, we probably would never know that this is so profound. In fact, let it be sutras or shastras. If we were to simply read it or skim through it, there is no way to study it thoroughly, to understand it at all. The only way of studying it thoroughly is either you have the opportunity to give teachings on it or listening to it while contemplating on the meanings. That's the time when you can truly understand or generate more understandings of it. People usually would tell me that, oh, I had read the Diamond Sutra, the Lotus Sutra, the Vimalakirti Sutra, the Surangama Sutra. That's wonderful. I truly rejoice that. However, I do wonder and do concern that simply skimming through it and read it once is not going to provide you that much of benefit. If you were to just read it, read the sutras as you read pulp fictions, then the profundity of the sutras will be very difficult to fuse into your heart and mind. In the later part, whenever you really want to study, I really hope that you can study it properly and to delve into the actual study of the sutras. In such a way, the sutras and shastras, the profound and wonderful and the subtle meanings of all of those could definitely grant you great benefit, and such benefit would be unfathomable. I sometimes would contemplate that the sutras and shastras are so vast, but we have such limited lifespan. We have such a very limited lifetime. It would be very difficult for us to study all of them, and many of those hidden gems are still stored in the library of sutras and shastras. If we were to have opportunity to study all of them, wouldn't that be wonderful? But since our life is very limited, we only have the time and wisdom to study the most essential part of the wisdom of the Buddha, and we can gain great benefit from it. As over here, when we're studying the Surangama Sutra, each of the questions and answers and then the examples given by the Buddha, as well as the analysis, you can see how profound and wonderful the wisdom of the Buddha is. So let's contemplate up on how the questions are answered and try to relate our practical life with the Buddha's wisdom as well. This would be quite helpful. Yesterday, when we talked about the Tathagata Garbha, the example of the space is quite important because the space doesn't have any shape and form, and by the causes and conditions, there's light and darkness, and it could manifest everything at the time of it is nothing. So our Tathagata Garbha is nothing but everything. It is devoid of existence as well as pure void. So this is the teachings that's been given here. Let's continue with today's class, where it talks about the enlightened mind, the Tathagata Garbha, the perfectly enlightened mind, and the perfect luminous wisdom. What is it? Later, when we look at the sutra, we will be able to see that from the conventional point of view, it is not the four great elements, the 6 entrances, 12 ayatanas, 18 dhatus, the 5 skandhas. In fact, the Tathagata Garbha, we would be able to say that they're not the Tathagata Garbha. And then later, the Buddha said that all of them are the Tathagata Garbha. Whenever in the worldly sense we say that it is and it is not, they are contradictory. But over here, when we talk about the Tathagata and when we say that it is and it is not at the same time, it is not contradictory. Let's look at the sutra. It says that it is not the mind, nor emptiness, nor earth, nor water, nor wind, nor fire. It is not the 7 elements. The 7 elements are not the Tathagata. These points are stated from the mundane being's point of view. It is very much from the mundane being's understanding. The earth, water, fire, and wind, all those 7 elements are part of the understanding of the mundane beings, but the Tathagata is not. They're not the subject of the understanding of the mundane beings. Over here, it talks about the 7 great elements. And then over here, it talks about the 12 ayatanas, where it says it is not the eyes, nor the ears, nor nose, nor tongue, the body, or the mind. It is not form, not sound, smells, tastes, objects of touch, or dharmas. It is not the realm of the ear consciousness, nor any other. All the way between the realm of eye consciousness, the nose consciousness, and the touch consciousness, and then the ear consciousness, all of those realms up to and include the realm of mind consciousness. So the 12 ayatanas, the 18 dhatus, the 6 roots, the 6 objects, and the 6 consciousness are not the Tathagata. And then the next part talks about the Tathagata is not the object of understanding to the Pratika Buddhas. It is not understanding nor ignorance, nor the ending of understanding or ignorance, nor any other, up to and including old age and death, and the ending of old age and death. So it's not ignorance nor understanding or knowing. The object of the Pratika Buddhas are the 12 nidanas. You can look at it from a clockwise angle or from the anti-clockwise pattern. It either starts from the ignorance to old age and death, or old age and death, ending of old age and death to the ending of ignorance. The Pratika Buddhas, by relying on looking at the 12 nidanas from the anti-clockwise angle to attain Buddhahood, to become Pratika Buddhas rather. But the Tathagata is not any of the dharmas in the 12 nidanas. It is not part of the nature of Tathagata. The next part is of the dharmas of the Shravakas. It is not suffering, nor accumulation, nor extinction, nor the way. It is neither knowing nor attaining. So the four truths and neither knowing nor attaining, that's the Shravakas. Also, the Tathagata are not the Bodhisattva's dharmas. The Bodhisattvas over here are talked about from the 6 paramitas or the 10 paramitas. So over here it says that it is not dana, which is generosity, nor shila, the pure precepts, nor virya, which is the patience, nor kshanti, the diligence, nor dhyana, the meditative absorption, nor prajna, wisdom, nor paramita, which is the other shore. So the previous one is prajna, the sharp wisdom, and then paramita, the other shore. These are the dharmas of the Bodhisattvas, whom rely on the 6 paramitas, would be able to attain realization. But the 6 paramitas or 10 paramitas cannot be attained in the nature of the Tathagata. Now the next one talks about the Buddha's Dharma. Nor any other, it is not the Tathagata, nor the Arhats, nor Samyak Sambodhi, nor parinirvana, nor permanence, nor bliss, nor true self, nor purity. It is not the Tathagata, which in Sanskrit is the thus come one, and then nor the Arhat, those worthy of offerings, and then the Samyak Sambodhi, the title of one proper and universal knowledge, one of proper and universal knowledge. These are also empty. Each and every of the 10 names of the Buddha, if you were to make the observation, the great parinirvana of the Buddha, the great fruition, is also not the true Tathagata. After that, then it says that nor permanence, nor bliss, nor true self, nor purity. It says that it is not of permanence, not of bliss, nor true self, nor purity. So it points out that the Tathagata is not the Buddha Dharma, the Buddha's Dharma. Therefore, it is neither mundane nor transcendental. In the later part, we'll look at the explanation further, because it talks about the mundane and transmundane. In terms of mundane, it refers to all the secular mundane dharmas of the mundane beings. And then the transcendental refers to all the way from the Shravakas, Brahmatikas, Arhats, and Bodhisattvas, all the way to the Buddha. All of those transcendental dharmas are not existent in the true nature and true ground of the Buddha, of the Tathagata either. All of those cannot be obtained. When we talked about the space yesterday, though myriads of appearances would be able to manifest, to appear, it could be bright, could be dark, could be clear, it could have all kinds of reflections, but are those really space? They're not space. But can they appear? Yes, they can appear. But those appearances are not space. In the past, whenever we try to understand and grasp on the big and small and all of those kinds of unfathomable things in our life, it's very difficult to understand. But nowadays, because of the advancement of technology, there's the little chips, little computer chips that could compress lots of information within it. Then, once you install those different types of programs and even lots of gigabytes of information that could be compressed onto a little chip and then be extended into in front of your eyes. At the same time, it could very quickly disappear, and then it could manifest again, as long as there are causes and conditions. So for mundane beings, it's a bit difficult to understand. But some of those technologies, the worldly technologies, had reached to such a level where we could see how it works. We could see it work, but not necessarily knowing how it works. We don't necessarily know why it works. Sometimes I would contemplate to myself that this little USB stick could include so many files and so many things on it. The causes and conditions are indeed very unfathomable. When you put it onto your computer, you would be able to see all kinds of things. Or if there's a large screen, you can use the wireless way to turn it on and off. The audios and videos, all of those technology, they do exist, but it's difficult to think about the causes and conditions. But as long as there are the maturation of the various kinds of causes and conditions that forms those appearances, then they can appear, they can manifest. When we talked about the four directions and four great elements, whenever there are appropriate causes and conditions that's matured, then they would be able to manifest. Similarly, our Tathagata is the same. Many of those things, though that we think that it could be quite contradictory to each other, close to being impossible, but we can indeed see them working in our life, in our mundane world. But if I were to ask you how it works, probably not many people would see that, would be able to know that. Even people who are very good at IT and computers, they can work, they can make the computers work, but they don't quite know every aspect of it. For example, I asked a staff member to demonstrate how the monastery's fences would look like. And in a very quick time, he just demonstrated this 3D modeling of it. He can definitely show me the pictures, and he knows how to do that. But if you were to ask how did it work, he probably won't be able to understand all of the aspects of it. So it's quite unfathomable. In the Zen Buddhism, where they would say that there is not one Dharma that we establish nor abandon. In the true realization, there is no Dharma that needs to be established nor to be abandoned. Both of the establishing and abandoning need to be refuted. At the time of refuting it, there is the kind of insight and experience that is wondrous beyond speech. Even that kind of insight do not need to be refuted. So sometimes I would think to myself that lots of the different schools of Tibetan Buddhism, since there are such a variety of teachings, it is quite wonderful because each of the different schools make emphasis on different aspects of the Buddha's teaching. For example, the Jonampas are very good at talking the wondrous functions, the manifestations of the Tathagata, including Kalachakra and the Uddhara Tantra Shastra. Lots of commentaries were made from that school. And then Gelugpa are very good at making the analysis from the angle of emptiness. They're excellent at it. In the Sakyapas, they place great importance on practice. The Nimapas are excellent at explaining the luminous and empty aspect of the mind is non-dual according to the evidence from sutras and the tantras. So since the Buddha's vast mind is ocean-like, the wisdom is ocean-like, therefore the various different great masters whom can understand the sacred meaning of the Buddha can penetrate into the most profundity of the wisdom, then of course we should be able to study from the different angles and not to create any of the conflicts. Because if you were to do so, if you were to compete with one another instead, that is simply creating negative karma and not meaningful at all. Let's now continue to look at the Tathagata. Previously, we had negated to all kinds of things, and now we're going to look at what is. It seems really contradictory to each other, isn't it? But according to Mipa Rinpoche's Beacon of Certainty, he says that what seems to be contradictory, indeed it is not, because there are such profundity of meaning within. When we look into our own mind, it is also like such, and it's easy, especially when we truly make observation of our mind. From the empty aspect, then indeed there is not a mote of dust that we can find, but from the luminous aspect, we can see such clarity and see such luminosity that cannot be expounded through language. the principle is such that it applies to our mind, to all phenomena, that we can see that there is no Dharma that is not empty. But from the empty, since the Dharma is empty and cannot be obtained, but there is such luminous appearances. And this has been expounded by Buddhism. There is the concise and very sharp observation and analysis. We are not simply asking you to take in this teaching from your faith or with your faith. I'm simply asking you to take it in with your wisdom. Earlier we talked about the Tathagata. Now we're going to look at how everything is. Previously we talked about how everything is not. It is the mind, it is emptiness, it is earth, it is water, it is the wind, it is fire, it is the eyes, it is ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, the mind, it is form, it is sound, smell, taste, objects of touch and dharmas, it is the realms of eye consciousness and so forth up to and including the realm of mind consciousness. Since for all the mundane beings, these are the Dharma that's subject to the mundane beings. Within the Tathagata, in the conventional point of view, they do appear, therefore they are. From the Pratika Buddha's point of view, it is understanding and ignorance and ending of understanding and ignorance and so forth up to and including old age and death and ending of old age and death. These are the Dharmas subject to the Pratika Buddhas. And the next one to the Shravakas. It is suffering, it is accumulation, it is extinction, and it is the way. It is knowing and attaining. It is the next one is on the Bodhisattvas. It is Dana, it is Shila, it is Virya, it is Kshanti, it is Dhyana, it is Prajna, and it is Paramita, and so forth up to and including then the next one, the part talks about the Buddhas, the Tathagata, the Arhats, the Samyak Sambodhi, Parinirvana, permanence, bliss, true self, and purity. All of these are the dharmas all the way between the mundane beings to the Buddhahood. So they are. Previously, we talked about how everything is not, and then now everything is. According to the Great Jewel Heap Sutra, it says that the wise ones do not see forms, nor not see forms. That is similar to when we say that the form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Many people don't understand what it is, or don't really truly understand what it is. If you were to truly make the investigation and observation, it's actually quite easy to understand it. So over here it says that the Tathagata are not all of the things that's stated. At the same time, they are. Is it a contradictory? It is not. How so? It says that the thus come one is the wonderful brightness of the fundamental mind. Earlier, we used there were quite a few different words of the different rearrangement of the Chinese characters to describe this luminous mind. I think the Tibetan version mainly translated as the perfect enlightened mind or the luminous mind. Mainly that's the translation, but I think the Chinese translation tried to used more flowery language to adorn the translation. Therefore, there are quite a few of the juggling of the positions of certain words, the brightness and enlightenment, the awareness, the wonderful. There are quite a few of the interchanges of those. But the meaning is the same, which points to the wonderful Tathagata. It is apart from is and is not. It is identical with is and is not. Isn't it quite special? It means that the bright Tathagata has already parted from is and parted from is not, which is refuting to the worldly and transcending or transcendental. In the true sense, the worldly and the transcendental Dharma cannot be obtained, even a mote of dust of it. In its true nature, there is nothing to be obtained. In the Madhyamika teachings, we study that the truth is parted from the four extremes, the 8 elaborations. It is not coming, not going, not constant, not void, not one, not other. There are the different ways of making such observations. However, in the manifestations, in the appearances, after we have refuted is and is not, in the appearances, there is the necessity to establish that everything is, which is to establish the appearances of all the worldly and the transcending, stating that the Tathagata is the earth, water, fire, and all the way to the Tathagata, to the Parinirvana, to the Samyak Sambodhi, and so on and so forth. At the same time, it is parted from is and is not. It is identical with is and is not. How can living beings in the 3 realms of existence, on the level of worldliness and the sound hearers and those enlightened to conditions, on the level of transcendence, make suppositions about the Supreme Bodhi of the Thus Come One with the minds that they know of, or enter the knowledge and vision of the Buddha through the medium of worldly language and expression? This is a question posed to the Buddha. In the 3 existence, in the samsara of the world, the sentient beings, the transmundane or transcendental Shravakas and Pratika Buddhas, how could they understand the Supreme Bodhi? How would they be able to enter into the wonderful and profound wisdom, such unfathomable wisdom of the Buddha through the worldly language? The commentary of Holding the Palm, it says that one can only understand through wisdom and not through consciousness, the mind consciousness. The worldly and the transcendental practitioners, when it comes to the wonderful wisdom of Bodhi that is supreme, in fact, this cannot be expressed by language. Even if one were to try to express it, it's not going to be that clear. And on top of that, using the mind to try to measure such wisdom, to try to contemplate upon it, is also not going to fathom it. And then the Buddha gives an example. For example, lutes, flutes, and pipa, which is a type of guitar, can make wonderful sounds. But if there are no skilled fingers to play them, their music will never come forth. According to the Tibetan translation, since pipa, the instrument, has the different types of them. There are the ones that has 7 strings and 25 strings and 14 strings. So there are different categories of the pipa instrument. But we won't get too elaborated over here. it says that those instruments, though they could make those wonderful sounds, but if we don't have those skilled fingers to play them, the music will never come forth. There are people who are very good at playing instruments. If you're not skilled in playing those instruments, then the sound doesn't really, the beautiful sound really doesn't come forth. We used to play flute before, and then the sound, if the students doesn't really know how to play it, then the sound doesn't sound very beautiful anymore. The Buddha then said that you and all living beings are the same way. The precious enlightened mind is perfect in everyone. So without the skilled finger, then there is no way for the beautiful sound of the instrument to come forth. Similarly, without good piece instructions, the wonderful enlightenment will not come forth either. It would be the best not to make such strong tea in the evening for me. I have a difficult time to fall asleep after such strong tea. Can you lend me some of your water to pour it into my tea? You and all living beings are all the same way. Which way? The precious enlightened mind is perfect in everyone. The enlightened mind, this awareness, this true mind, this Tathagata is perfectly, intrinsically existent in everyone. And then the Buddha continued to say that, thus, I press my finger up on it, and the ocean impression emits light. However, without the blessings of the Buddha, without the pointing out of the teacher or the teachings through the teacher, there is no way to radiate such light, luminosity of awareness. The Buddha over here pressed his finger up on it, and then the ocean impression, which is a samadhi according to the Avatamsaka Sutra, it is the ocean seal like samadhi. It is a samadhi that could truly see the true mind of Tathagata. This light of the ocean seal samadhi can be radiated out. If we can receive such pointing out and instructions from the Buddha to see the true Tathagata, this perfect mind, then this light can be emitted. If we have not met the true Buddha, by relying on a teacher who's experienced, who has inner realization, and at the time, if that teacher could give us instructions through their wonderful or skilled finger to press us, then this light of ocean seal samadhi can be emitted. You move your mind, and the wearisome defilements spring up. But the Buddha said over here, sadly, the mind at that moment, your mind, Purna, at that moment had already sprung up some dualistic thoughts because you did not recognize your true mind. Initially, you should be able to see the nature of your mind. However, at that moment, your mind was distracted. I think it's very similar to us, to our experience as well. Initially, your teacher at the time of giving peace instruction instruction or some really important instructions, by relying on that instruction, you should have been able to see the nature of your mind or get this insight and have epiphany. But because we didn't confess our defilements and we had all kinds of selfish mind, or the afflictions of the previous life had not been purified fully, various kinds of reasons could lead us to what we are now, which is not enlightened yet. Therefore, we need to practice wholeheartedly on supplication and on eradicating all kinds of obscurations on the path of our practice. The next part says that it is all because you do not diligently seek the unsurpassed enlightened way, which is the Mahayana, but are found of the lesser vehicle and are satisfied with little attainment. The Buddha over here scolded that some of the practitioners who's sufficed by the Hinayana, the smaller vehicle, which is why we do not seek diligently onto the Mahayana path of the great Bodhi. The key is that we have too much grasping to the smaller vehicle. We have too much self-centeredness and we're very self-cherishing. We have so much self-cherishing that we are so sufficed by being happy in samsara. As long as I have a little bit of contentment in meal, in clothes, in the happiness of today, then I'll be fine. And such kind of contentment lead to the loss of the longing to attain enlightenment for all sentient beings. If we were to generate this eagerness to liberate all sentient beings, to benefit all sentient beings, for that reason, to attain liberation, then we will study with great diligence. Otherwise, if we were to simply just practice for our own health, for our own happiness, and to be completely self-cherishing and self-centered, which is definitely the biggest obstruction to attainment. People would say that I've lived here for so many years, I've studied the Dharma for so many years, why is it that I haven't attained enlightenment? Then those are the questions that you really need to investigate by yourself. Have we truly given up all the self-cherishing mind like the great masters to truly, wholeheartedly and single-mindedly to benefit sentient beings and to generate the mind of bodhicitta? Yet, each one of us, of course, we have different karma, but if you were to use those as excuses not to diligently practice in this lifetime, then it will not help you to attain liberation. We are here for so many years and we have 24 hours within a day. If we can love practice as we love a worldly lover, then there is definitely the hope of attaining liberation. Do you really seek for liberation like how you miss or how you think of your lover? That's a question you need to ask yourself. Purna over here said, I am non-dual and complete with the thus come one's perfect brightness of the precious enlightenment, the true wonder of the pure mind. Each and every sentient being, in fact, all have such brightness and such perfect enlightenment and precious enlightenment. And then the Purna said that, but long ago I was victimized by false thoughts that have no beginning, and I have long endured the turning wheel of rebirth. Now I have attained the sagely vehicle, but it is not yet ultimate. Here, Venerable Purna makes this introspective observation, and he's quite remorseful, saying that though I had such a wonderful resource within me, this perfectly enlightened nature, but because I had been attacked by the illusion from beginningless time, for such reason, I am still dwelled in this samsara, and I'm still wandering in the samsara. It is only because of the Buddha and the spiritual teacher's great kindness now that I have encountered with this supreme a vehicle, probably the Mahayana. Maybe that's what he points to right now. However, from here to reaching the Mahayana is still quite far. And then he said that the world-honored one has completely extinguished all falseness and obtained wonderful true permanence. Venerable Purna thinks in such a way that wouldn't that be wonderful to eliminate all of the illusions so that I can attain the true nature? So he makes this question. So that I venture to ask the thus come one, why all living beings exist in falseness and conceal their own wonderful brightness so that they keep drowning in this deluge? He's asking, I have this question, and it's been concealed in my mind for a long period of time. But can I please ask you a question? Please don't get mad at me for asking this question. So now I have this opportunity, I just have to ask. I'm asking that since I really want to eradicate my illusion so that I can recognize my true nature, and now I want to ask, all sentient beings have this illusion. What's the causes and conditions for that? Since delusion has been obscuring our bright and luminous and wonderful mind, asking this question because he understands that there are so many beings that's still wandering in samsara. And many people have the similar question. Where does ignorance come from? Where does illusion come from? Many people have this question. Now, I invite you to also think about it. The Venerable Purna asked the Buddha, saying that all sentient beings have the delusion and falseness and conceal their own wonderful brightness so that they keep drowning in this delusion, in this samsara. Some commentary asks that if the sentient beings have Tathagata, why is there the manifestation of the mountains, rivers, and the grounds? So over here it mainly discusses the causes of ignorance. What's the cause of ignorance that spurs from one thought? Where does the ignorance comes from? Where is the cause of it? Many people ask this question. And then the Buddha said to Purna, this part is really important. You need to remember it. The Buddha said to Purna, although you have cast off doubts, you still have not ended residue delusions. Though that you have already cast off lots of doubts compared to some other disciples. However, there are some still residue delusions. The obscuration of affliction, obscuration of knowing. There are still lots of obscurations. I can see that through the questions that you ask. The Buddha could definitely tell the realization or the understandings of the disciples. And sometimes we can see a person through their questions as well. But the Buddha did not directly answer Purna's question. The Buddha, in fact, asked another question, saying that I will now employ a worldly event in questioning you. This is quite an important way of giving a teaching. Sometimes I would like to ask questions to people. Sometimes after a question, if the other person would not be able to answer me, some kind of answer would come to me and I would be able to answer that question. The Buddha over here said that, have you not heard of Yajnadatta in Shravasti, who on impulse one morning held a mirror to his face and then fell in love with the head in the mirror, with the eyes and eyebrows that he gazed into. The Buddha said that there is a person whose name is Yajnadatta, a name. And this is probably a recent news happening in the city of Shravasti at the time. The Buddha said that, have you heard this news? This person whose name is Yajnadatta, who got up in the morning and then looked into the mirror, not so sure if this is a woman or a man, but this person looked into a mirror. This person's name is Yajnadatta. The Tibetans have the names usually have 4 syllables. For example, my full name is Sonam Darji. I'm not so sure who swallowed the nam out of the name. Therefore, people somehow simplified my name to Sodarji. I'm not so sure what happened to the middle to the second syllable of my name. And then people felt my name sounds very strange to their ears. Some calls me Darji, Dardo, Jidar Soul, or so on and so forth, the rearrangement of the different syllables. And I got introduced in various ways whenever I pay a visit to different schools and give them speech. Anyhow, in the story that the Buddha tells is that in the morning, this Yajnadatta woke up, he looked into a mirror, and then he saw a face that looks really beautiful. And the face that's reflected in the mirror is really bright. You need to keep in mind that the mirrors back then, around that time in India, is not as the mirrors that we see, because the mirrors back then are the brass mirrors and they're not as clear. So this person were able to see the clear face and clear eyebrows and eyes inside this mirror usually. However, this one morning, he gazed into the mirror and then got really upset, got quite aggressive, because he wasn't able to see the face reflection inside the mirror anymore. He only sees the body but not the face. And then he thought it must be a demonic possession that happened to me. Therefore, I am not able to see my therefore, I lost my head. That's what he thought at the time. Not so sure why he was not able to see the face or head in the mirror. Maybe it is an illusion, maybe it is a certain kind of appearances out of certain causes and conditions. Maybe it's just his eyes had problems, or maybe he had a heat stroke. We don't know the particular reasons behind it. But at that time, because he didn't see his reflection in the mirror, he saw he doesn't have a head, and he got really terrified because he thought a demon must have possessed him, and he lost his head. And then he got completely insane and completely mad, started to run away. And then the Buddha said that, well, Purna, what do you think? Why did this person set out on a mad chase for no reason? Purna over here said that, well, this person was insane. There is no other reason. How could this person got completely mad and lost his mind after not seeing his own reflection inside the mirror? He simply had just gone mad. Other than that, there's no other reason. It is not because someone cut off his head. It is not because someone who a conjurer, a magician, who conjured some kind of tricks and then hid his head. It was nothing that actually happened to his head. It was nothing that actually happened could lead to his insanity. It is rather this person just had gone insane. Therefore, when we apply the same story to a ignorance? What's the cause of ignorance? It's exactly like that. This example is so wonderful. The Buddha then continued to say that, what reason can you give for calling false the wonderful, enlightened, bright perfection? Now, another rearrangement of the four terms, the wonderful, enlightened, bright perfection, the fundamentally perfect, bright wonder. If there is a reason, then how can you say it is false? How could the Tathagata has a cause of delusion? Because it is delusion, therefore there is no cause. There is no way for a reason to induce delusion. We had already stated that we're already pure, we're intrinsically pure. It is simply because of delusion we're still wandering in samsara. But this delusion doesn't have a cause. Many people ask, what's the cause for ignorance? And you say that there is no cause. Because if there is a reason, then how can you say it is false? If there is a reason, if there is a cause, then it must be true. Then how could you call something true as false? Because something true produce something that is truly existent, then it is no longer called false. The false is called false is because it doesn't have a cause, doesn't have a reason, therefore it is called false. Just like the person who just went insane out of no reason. There is no reason behind it. He just simply went insane. What's the cause for it? I think this is such a great example to remember. We need to truly contemplate upon it. All your own false thinking becomes in turn the cause for more. From confusion, you accumulate confusion through kalpas after kalpa. The sentient beings like us, out of this reasonless one thought of delusion, and then accumulate again and again on top of each other, and then lead us to be reborn again and again in samsara. In this class, we are quite clear about the cause of delusion now is without a cause. In the past, whenever we talk about ignorance, what's the reason of ignorance? There is no reason. It's just simply that someone went insane for no reason. It is simply because there is a false perception of looking into the mirror and not seeing his head and taking that as he doesn't have a head. According to the Sutra of Non-Retrogression, it says that to directly see the ignorance, you will see that it is not arising. It cannot arise. Just like the reflection of the water, it is truly not existent. So it means that the directly seeing of the ignorance had never truly existed, just like the reflection within water. The thing that never truly existed, there is simply a reflection. Since this is simply a reflection that is devoid of any truly existent entity, then how could you find a cause for it? So the sentient beings, the ignorance of the sentient beings does not have a cause. If it does have a cause, then it is no longer false anymore. Whenever people were to ask you the same question, you can say that, well, if there is a reason, then how can you say it is false? You can answer that from the Surangama Sutra. For people with wisdom, if you were to answer them in such a way, they will be able to get it right away. All of the sufferings from confusion, you accumulate confusion through kalpas after kalpas. For the sun numbers of kalpas, the sentient beings suffer through samsara. It's just because of it. Although the Buddha is aware of it, he cannot counteract it. Just like the person that we studied, he himself thinks that he doesn't have a head anymore, so he just went insane. When other people were to tell him, "Oh, what's the point of it? You should go back to your home and live your life. You don't need to be afraid of it, since you don't have this cause for not having a head." But this person, since he's already insane, and maybe because of his very special causes and conditions at that moment, so he really couldn't go back to normal life anymore. That is exactly like the sentient beings like us as well. The Buddha, though, had taught such wonderful teachings of the Dharma, but because of our habitual tendencies that is so deep-rooted, it's very difficult for us to go back to our original state. From such confused causes, the cause of confusion perpetuates itself. When one realizes that confusion has no cause, the falseness becomes baseless. If we were to recognize it right away, right at this moment, then it is gone. But because we have such solid habitual tendencies, it is very difficult. However, when you make the observation, when one realizes that confusion has no cause, it is rootless, the falseness becomes baseless. Then, in that way, there is no delusion. It is not possible to have a delusion. Since it never arose, why would you hope for its extinction? Since it never really arose, then how could there be an extinction? The birth and death, the arising and extinction cannot be obtained. So the causes and conditions that is just an illusory display in front of the sentient beings, sometimes we can see how quite laughable it is. However, before we truly eradicated the web of birth and death, we need to try our best to receive the peace instructions from the spiritual teacher.